Good morning, Morgan.
Good morning, Nicholas. How are you?
Good. This Thursday show keeps throwing me for a loop. It just
I know.
seems like it sneaks up on us.
I feel the same goes with holidays on a Saturday this year too, where usually you get the extra day off, somewhere in the middle of a week, and it feels like the weeks are then longer. But then to have them on a weekend is really disconcerting too. I think it's all sort of wonky at the end of this year.
Yeah. It
So
and this whole
happy
year just disappeared.
Thursday. Happy Thursday instead of Friday.
Happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the B2B Power Hour.
Yes. I don't know what. No, Nick has coffee, so there's no champagne in this, but a very close to Happy New Year to everyone tuning in. If you're here, drop a hello in chat. We'd love to say hi. And today's episode is just going to be a fun. I don't know if it's going to be a gauntlet, but I certainly think we got a lot of ground to cover today. Nick and I have been working on for the last number of months, picking out trends, looking at what is going on in the B2B sales sphere, B2B marketing sphere, thinking about how and learning how companies are currently going to market, how they're talking about going to market, usually in like RevOps is the new thing, and where companies are going to fall flat on their face this next year. So we wanted to spend this last live show of 2021 offering our own predictions for 2022. We've got 7 of them. They are detailed in some ways, and other ones are they're still detailed. It's just we've got some ground to cover on a couple of them. There's a lot of directions we can take. So Nick, are you ready to jump into our first prediction?
Yeah, and thank you guys for joining us. This came from a lot of research and a lot of conversation. So this isn't just stuff that are just our opinions. This is coming from what we've seen using the LinkedIn in 30. This is coming from all the different work that we've done and even from the podcast interviews. So please, as you have questions, throw them in the chat. Let's dive a little deeper on the topics you're interested in and give you something to think about over the last little bit of holidays before it kicks off. Probably for most of us, January 4th. So let's go, Morgan. Where do you want to start?
Let's do number 1, account-based marketing. Nick, where is account-based marketing going in 2022?
You know what? Account-based marketing was really smart, and it follows the account-based sales that we've done for years. Because if you don't have a good account strategy on a big enough deal that it's still profitable, you lost. You had to go and have that strategy coming in, or else you wouldn't be talking to the right people, you wouldn't be getting the right information, and you wouldn't be building the right deal to move forward. And to me, what actually happened is account-based marketing took charge instead of just leaving it to sales to do one-on-one because it wasn't as cost effective. And I think a lot got lost in the buzzwords. And so many people were realizing, holy crap, like our revenue isn't where it should be, our profit's not where it should be, we're not growing as fast as we should be. And so what happened? They weren't executing properly because they shouldn't have been doing it at all. And they just kept running at the newest, shiniest thing, thinking it was going to save them from their outdated tactics.
Totally.
So how many companies, and you guys can put up your hand if you want, but I see this all the time where companies will have 10, 20, 50 salespeople with another additional 25% business development people, typically SDRs, maybe even field marketing. And then what do they have for marketing team?
3 at best. Yeah.
Most companies I see that have less than 200 people have less than 5 marketers. No budget for tech spend and no budget for paid ads. You shouldn't be even looking at ABM in the first place.
Yeah, and that I think ABM is certainly the hype right now that we see on LinkedIn, which is why we wanted to kick it off with this. Because I mean, it's the buzzword that gets thrown around, and sometimes it's what's the alphabet soup. Sometimes there's ABX, sometimes there's ABS, ABSD, ABM. In our universe, it's sort of a similar tactic, no matter which way you take it. But I think so many companies will try ABM this next year. And because they aren't staffed and resourced properly from a people side, certainly you have to have marketers to do ABM, but also to what you were saying, Nick, is the tech stack, the budget for ad spend, the ability and time to personalize, the right coordination across teams. I think ABM will be the big hype. Lots of companies will try and execute on it. And probably a good chunk of them will regret that decision. Uh,
Yeah. It it seems like a good idea. And the reality
mhm.
is account-based sales development, sales strategy, account strategy works. The reason why this doesn't work for most companies is because they don't have enough resources to execute it properly because it's time consuming. It's also expensive because depending on what size of accounts you're going after, there's quite a healthy spend that comes behind it. And so you got to really think if your team is really about to invest into ABM, don't look at it that it's a good idea. Look at it if you can afford it. Can you afford it? And is it going to pay off soon enough that you're going to make your money back? Because you got to look at anytime you're investing into a go to market, you're allocating dollars towards a strategy. And if you can't afford to run that strategy from start to finish and actually see a return, it's a failure, which really sucks because I've looked at a lot of these programs and most of these people aren't actually breaking even for 2, 3, 5 years on their ABM strategies. They're also not customizing and they honestly don't know enough about their customers for it to be relevant. So we need to take a step back and look at
Mhm.
our go to market and look at if ABM is the right choice and look at how much it costs and how long it's taking for us to even make money. And, I'll just throw it out there. Whether it's ABM, product led growth, PLG, which is a new one because people are getting sick of talking to salespeople when they don't need to talk to them, they just want to buy, or they're,
Uh-huh.
getting dragged through a useless process that doesn't work. We need to put our customers first. And if we do that, maybe customer success is going to be a big one. Maybe we'll talk about that later.
Totally. Well, and I think what you point out is that ABM and any of the alphabet soup is a strategy. It is a go-to-market strategy. It is not a tech stack. And I suspect lots of companies will simply purchase whatever tech vendor is out there promoting ABM, think they're running ABM, and then the ROI just isn't there. Because to your point, especially if you have smaller deal sizes and you're trying to invest so much on the front end on one-to-one campaigns that you don't see an ROI for 3 years, like that's not sustainable, or any ROI for that matter. I mean, especially if you have a small enough deal size. So prediction one, ABM is going to be hype, but maybe won't go the mile.
And I think it really leads well into number two, which is people
Hmm.
just need to reassess their routes to market. And the big things is it affordable and is it profitable?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know how many companies I've looked at their sales development motion and you're looking at the accounts that they're targeting and they're not profitable.
Mm-mm.
And I'm talking just the account, no cost of goods sold, no, like, excluding what it costs to get them. It's not profitable. This is the problem. If there isn't a strong business case for you to go and target that customer, you shouldn't be talking to them. But right now, so many companies in the past 2 years are so hungry, they're in survival mode that it's like they turned their brains off and they forgot to go and look at the whole point of having a business is to make money. And if it's not profitable business, then you shouldn't be doing it. And so
Hmm.
I've looked at a lot of companies where it's 3 to 5 years if they're not churning those customers. And most of them aren't growing their accounts because they don't run a know and grow or a land and expand program. And so there's no strategy of how they're building those accounts. They're just trying to get them. And that's all their strategy just goes into the get, no keep and grow. And
Hmm.
so it's actually digging themselves a hole. And what I see is after they dig themselves a hole, guess what follows, Morgan?
Oh no.
A funding round. I
Totally.
wonder why they need the funding round because they need to
Yeah.
scale. They're not
Hmm.
scaling they're trying to build runway, and that runway is trying to cover the hole they dug. And this is where we got to be really careful with sales at scale, is if it's not profitable from day one, or you don't have a strategy to make it profitable right away, you're never going to have enough runway to scale because it's
Mhm.
not profitable to begin with.
And honestly, I think part of that is why companies are looking at product led growth as a solution because, frankly, lead generation is a 2012 playbook that we're still running in 2021. And because the markets have changed, ad spend is more expensive. There's more noise in the marketplace. There's more competition. Where you previously had to talk to a sales rep to get a demo, to get qualified and passed off to an account executive, these companies can circumvent those costs of acquisition, let's say, by running a product led growth because their current inbound motion is not scalable, mostly because they're continuing to run inefficient lead generation. Now, that doesn't mean product led growth, or at least I don't believe PLG is appropriate for every company out there, right? So the companies that can adopt product led growth, that can do the sort of standard, you sell a piece of software, it's on a freemium trial, however that works for you, that's great. That's important. But it's not necessarily a replacement for good marketing on top of it. Like part of product led growth in my view is also creating demand in the marketplace. So that's demand generation and driving inbound motions to your product instead of to a salesperson or to a demo call or to a lead nurture list. You're sort of changing the end goal of that inbound process. But to Nick's point, you have to continue to measure the profitability of those strategies in the short run. And I mean, obviously, sometimes if you're dealing with larger deal sizes, your ROI is not realized in 6 months or 12 months. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's part of the deal, maybe. But if you're not looking at a 2-year horizon and saying, is this customer going to be around in a couple of years? How are we keeping them? From this go-to-market strategy to land and expand, you're shooting yourselves in the foot no matter what go-to-market strategy you choose.
Well said.
Thank you.
As sales and as marketers, we are our own profit centers. And if we are not controlling that floodgate, all we're going to do is churn and burn.
It's true.
And that's all it is. One thing that I've noticed recently, and this is going to piss off a lot of people, but I'm going to say it anyways,
Do it.
look who's giving the advice. And you hear a lot of people talk about tech vendors and the research firms, but look at the age. You have 50-plus-year-olds telling, they're less than 10%, or I think they're about 13 or 16% of the buyers right now, dictating how everybody's buying. Yet that's not how they buy, and it's how they used to buy. So think about it from if you're a millennial or younger, think about how you buy right now. So you go and buy something from a store. Do you just walk into the store and ask questions? No, it's uncomfortable. Most people that I talk to, even if they're going to a sport check or they're going to even sometimes a grocery store, like a newer grocery store, they go to the website, they do their research, and they've already planned out their purchases before they go. The reality is the only time they talk to a salesperson is when they need advice or they have questions. The reality is if they don't need to see you at all. They just need
Mm-hmm.
to have a button to say buy now. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think we're going to see a huge movement where these self-directed options are going to win almost like an e-commerce type play for B2B, because people are getting sick of talking to salespeople and delaying the gratification of buying something they really need,
Yep.
dealing with, for lack of a better term, a stupid sales process that doesn't respect
Yeah.
anyone in the process. Like they don't, if you're not collaborating for a solution, if you're not like having some type of consulting play where it's a layered complex solution, the reality is they probably know a lot when they come to you and they don't need to talk to you. And this is where the costs really ramp up, is because we are getting in the way of our customers, where we could actually invest more into the later stages of the know and grow those accounts by educating them post sale.
Yeah.
But we
And
get
that's
too married to when we have to talk to them and where we
yeah.
have to invest, and we don't actually look at how we should allocate our time and our spending based on how we run our own profit center.
Totally. And I think Cost of acquisition is actually only one metric when you think about a profit center. That's just acquiring the customer, not the cost of keeping them. And hopefully, the cost of keeping them is a lot lower than the cost of acquiring them. But I also think part of the overall shift that we're seeing in this category about routes to market, profitability, thinking about what that sales motion is um, marketing is likely going to be increasingly tied to financial metrics. And I don't know if we will see a lot of discipline on this in this 12 months. I believe it will be emerging,
Mhm.
especially at larger companies, because competition is back and there's a lot of noise in the marketplace. And so some CFOs are definitely going to drive tying financial metrics to marketing. I think we saw this McKinsey report that had said that 45% of CFOs declined a marketing proposal because it didn't demonstrate a clear line to value. And and I believe it was another 83% of C-suite stakeholders or CFOs saw marketing to be a clear driver of growth. So when you combine those two things together, I think you'll see a lot of discipline from the financial arms of companies thinking about, okay, what is the profitability of our marketing and how do we measure that? And part of that for me is most companies don't have the correct financial metrics to actually understand what the heck they're doing, right? And part of assessing your routes to market and figuring out, is this the profitable way, is not using siloed metrics. Cost of acquisition, I believe, should be the broadest possible CAC. It should be all of your activities together in a lump sum or bucketed together, measured against the revenue that you generate off of those activities. Because if you, in my view, start siloing it and saying, here's our single channel CAC, like we ran $25,000 of ads this month on this platform or whatever, that's not great intelligence in my view. Like, did it drive any customers? That's better. But then how long were the sales cycles? How large were the contracts? Were they actually a profitable customer? Or did your success team lose their minds trying to fulfill the order? So I think building better revenue intelligence, which from what we've discussed, Nick, is a conversation that happens between marketing, sales, success, and finance about all
Mhm.
the customers through all of those suites. Building that revenue intelligence is going to be crucial for company success in the near term, especially this year and especially the year after, as they are armed with better information about their customers.
Well, the Refine Labs team said to go and do, uh, how did you hear about us for on your initial form? And I
Mm-hmm.
found it really interesting because they also break it up by how did they first hear about you? How was the demand created? And then how was the demand captured? And that's really interesting too, because your customers will, and Chris said it, and not that I was skeptical. Yeah, I was. And I started digging into it, and even within our own CRM, and a lot of it was misplaced or unknown. And when you go through this activity and now you look at what activities actually created that pipeline and what actually captured them and got them into the pipeline is really interesting. And now you go to finance and you go, okay, how much do we spend on people and programs for this? And then you got to figure out your own rhythm of how you're capturing that so that you can go and not necessarily attribute everything. You don't have to go
Mm,
and scale and go and track everything, but we need to have a good idea if what we're selling is profitable to drive growth in the future.
totally.
And side note, I was actually talking to finance managers about what metrics they were tracking.
Hmm.
Out of the 15 I talked to, guess how many went and tracked anything to do with sales, Morgan?
I hope some.
All they
Oh,
tracked was top line revenue and then they did profitability after the fact. Not one of them had any guidelines on how to go and track anything ongoing.
mm,
So they just attributed all of the salaries and all the compensation to either their people,
hmm.
or they would put comp, and they'd put comp under people as well. They
Yeah, as
wouldn't
a
actually,
fixed expense.
yeah.
Yeah,
Just I just
that's a
thought it'd be
shame.
interesting to go and But this is a huge problem that we're seeing right now, because if companies actually took this into consideration, they would change the way they show up, they would change
Mhm.
the way they sell, and they'd also realize they know a lot less about their customers than they think.
No kidding. No kidding. And I think the last note to sort of like wrap this together is between the different channels that you're using to generate demand and capture demand, and as well as what you had said earlier, Nick, which I think is brilliant, and that's looking at your existing sales process as a part of your route to market or as a part to your go to market, and testing and also investigating as to whether that process actually works for your buyers is so crucial. I mean, this last year, I know Gartner released research about how many people are ready for digital self-service and how many buyers expect the ability to buy online. I still cringe a little bit when I see companies that don't have pricing on their site, especially if they sell like software or cloud software.
It's
Not because,
complex. They need
right,
they
oh,
need
it's
to
so
talk to a
complex,
salesperson.
but it's not because it's a quote unquote bad thing. Like, I support price transparency in the first place, but chances are they're going to ask their peers. They're
Hmm.
going to ask somebody, hey, how much did you pay? So you're not going to win that battle. They're already asking around. And that's because now, and this has been true this last year, especially, but will be more so in this new year, buyers are not linear. I don't know if they ever have been. Maybe we had a brief point in time in which they followed the funnel sequences, but they're non-linear, right? They're going to jump in a Slack channel, call a friend, visit your website, listen to a podcast your marketing team puts out, then maybe message somebody on LinkedIn, hey, I'd like to learn about your platform. That's very different than the prescription handed down by best practices in go to market, even as 3 years ago. And that's
Hmm.
going to play, I think, a big role in this new year as companies consider their routes to market.
Absolutely. And I imagine if they change comp for sales and
Oh
marketing.
gosh.
No, no,
Hmm.
no, no. Think so. In insurance, our comp was based on a 2-year retention.
Wow.
But why 2 years? Because it took 2 years for them to make money. So
Whoops.
if they churned that customer, you lost out
Yep.
on your commission.
Mm.
So imagine if we went and did the route to value instead of route to buying. A lot of companies that I talk to right now, I'm at 87% of sales leaders have a clearly defined route to transaction. Nobody goes and does anything to make them realize value.
Hmm.
So you're not delighting your customers, so they churn. But imagine if we move the milestone, instead of, touchdown they bought, touchdown they see the real value of it and they love it. And imagine if you were comped on that.
Yeah.
Think you'd change on who you were selling to and who you were talking to?
Absolutely. And I also think it would change the way revenue intelligence gets shared because, I mean, depending upon your go to market strategy, if you're doing product led growth, that's an incentive for deep listening with your existing customer base to build out new product features that will keep them satisfied and then therefore
Mm-hmm.
keep them expanded and as a retained account or an expanded account. But that only happens when the customer success manager lets the product team know what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be too callous here. That does happen at good companies, but it doesn't happen at every company. And you're really shooting yourself in the foot when you don't do that. Anyways, is that was a meaty prediction? Is that all of our number two, Nick?
Yeah, I'm seeing people are going to go and reassess, and we're going to see a major recalibration of go to market, and a lot of companies are going to get their feet held to the fire, not because it's what the way it's always been done, because companies are going to realize that there are better routes that are more cost effective that go further for every dollar. And it's going to be interesting, because I don't think a lot of companies are going to figure it out in 2021, in 2022, in 2023. It's going to be this mass A/B testing, and I think we're going to hear a lot of people trying a lot of different things, and there's going to be a lot of chatter and a lot of information sharing amongst our communities, which will lead us to our next point in social media. But there's going to be a lot of talking communities and a lot of collaboration amongst industries and peers to figure this out. We're heading into an exciting time, but the companies that choose to not participate, will fail. We're going to see big companies start to lose market share to much smaller players because they're not showing up in a way that's meaningful. And I think it's going to be an exciting time for anybody that's paying attention. There's going to be some companies that are moving quickly, and I'm talking more than 100% headcount growth, more than 100% year over year growth, and 10x
Absolutely.
maybe.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. All right. Prediction number 3.
Social media is going to dominate in 2022. It's
Yep.
already started. And if you're not on LinkedIn right now, if you're
Hmm.
watching this from Twitter or YouTube, you're missing out. Right
It's
now,
true.
we have the best access to our peers that we've ever had before, ever. And LinkedIn started out as a resume site. It was a place to get a job and to go and put yourself out professionally.
Hmm.
There's a reason why companies are trying to own our LinkedIns, is because it's highly effective at sharing information and building brands.
Yeah.
And so why is it so effective? Because people use it every day. Nobody goes on their email every day and reads every promotional product that they get. Nobody goes in their mail and reads all of the, goes through all the coupons or all the different, crap that we get in our mail. But everybody goes on some type of social media platform and just browses. How many people here scroll on TikTok? It doesn't mean that you're going there to learn, right? Sometimes you're just trying to pass some time, like you got 5 minutes to kill, or there's something entertaining, or you got some people that you follow that, I love woodworking. And some
Yeah.
of the stuff that people do and the quality of how they go and put it all together is mind blowing. But
And
nobody searches for that. That is the
right.
thing. That is why social media is almost a sneaky, you know, tactic in your back pocket, because people stumble upon your stuff. And I always compare it to the Netflix deep dive. If anybody's on this feed right now and you don't know who we are, you stumbled upon it. You're going to
Mhm.
hear something that first to insight where it's going to get you, and now you're hooked. And now you're going to dive into the podcast. Now you're going to dive into LinkedIn content. Now you're going to be part of our community and ask great questions that are going to go and help everyone out in the process. How did you do that before? It didn't
Yep.
exist.
Right. Well, and what's so interesting to me, I can speak to this a little bit from a more macro perspective because I do remember doing social media consulting in 2010 and 11. And back then, obviously, the big ones were Facebook and Twitter. And what and Pinterest. What has changed
Pinterest.
for me is the dominance of video. And I don't want us to underestimate this because, in my mind, there was a big peak in social media, probably 2012 to 2014. If I had to, those are the biggest sort of guidelines, especially on like a platform like Facebook, because the algorithm changed. And then Instagram sort of became the insurgent one everyone hopped to. And then now people are hopping to TikTok. I saw the other day that TikTok got more traffic than Google this last year. So if you think it's just a
Hype.
platform for dancing teens, you're wrong. It's not. The audience skews young, but young in this case is very relative. And in this year, I mean, TikTok has, I would argue, TikTok matured as a platform in 2021. It went from dancing teens to what we see today in a year. So give it another year. What do you expect? Right? Facebook used to be a college platform. Now it's boomer central, if we can say that. Okay. And that's part of the growth of the platform. That's how the platform matured. But TikTok is going to do the same thing. Right now, you may say, oh, it's just a bunch of 20-year-olds who are passing time liking the Duolingo memes that account puts out, which are very funny. But in 6 months' time, you're going to have more and more 30 to 40-year-olds on that platform. And the question that you get to ask is, what do we want to provide them? You
Yeah.
know?
And if you don't
That
believe me and don't believe Morgan,
Yeah,
go read the comments on TikTok.
dude, it's unreal.
There before, and I've been watching this because I'm always curious what social media channels are going to grow, especially coming
Hmm.
from a sales standpoint. It's always interesting to see where we should be spending our time, where should we be investing into. And before, it was frivolous. it was it was entertainment, right? It
There's
was a way to go
entertainment.
kill
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But now the level of conversation in the comments is growing, and now it's getting more sophisticated, and I'm noticing more directors, more like senior leadership, more managers, people are going there to seek information. And so I started asking people like, why are you investing into TikTok? And they said, well, originally I loved Twitter because it was short and sweet. So I didn't have to read a whole bunch of bullshit to go and get to the point, because so many
Yeah.
marketers would bury the lead so deep down into the blog that you
Ugh.
could just read the intro and the outro and you'd be done. Like,
Mm-hmm.
most of it was just garbage. But
Mm-hmm.
I loved Twitter because it was quick. And then they said they loved YouTube because they could see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it allowed them to go and search and then look at what, I use it for woodworking all the time. Like, how did they do that? How do you go and do this new technique? People use it for social media. I use it for technology all the time too. And they said, that's great. But now it's hitting the point of what blogs hit, and then it gets filled with too much crap. And so
Mm-hmm.
people are going to TikTok because TikTok is short and sweet and gets your attention quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest
And
question that I have about TikTok, and I'm going to throw it out there for you guys. So if you love somebody on TikTok that has the right information that gets your attention, where do you go after that?
right.
And that's the
And
question
this
for me that hasn't been answered yet.
companies have yet to figure out the sort of channel direction that they can take. Is it a link in bio? Is it a direct link? Offer one at a time? Are they recycling videos? I mean, the strategic principle that we're pointing to, I believe, is that companies that invest in creative and content will win in their marketing strategy. Now, it used to be that creative and content was a pretty looking ad that when you scrolled through Facebook, it would catch your attention. And it was a link to a landing page that you could get a white paper on and put in your name and your email. And lo and behold, you get thrown in a nurture sequence. First of all, that's not how buyers do stuff anymore. And secondly, that creative has changed. It is now video. Like, and I do not want to underestimate that video. YouTube saw crazy growth the last couple of years, not just because of the pandemic and everybody was locked down and needed to
Yeah.
pass the time in some way,
Shorts.
but the YouTube Shorts platform just took off. Every channel that I've heard and studied and looked at the data behind that invested in YouTube Shorts saw faster growth than the channels that did not. So there's all of this video content requires a different way of thinking about content production and creative for your company. And the reason you do this is not, in my view, to direct them to a landing page to put in their name and their email so they download a white paper so then you can lead nurture them on an email sequence or have an SDR reach out to them. That's the old sequence. The point of video, as to what Nick is talking about and what Chris Walker, I know, champions at Refine Labs, is native consumption. It's that when they're in feed, they're getting something from you. And so now you have to figure out, well, what do they want in feed? Whether it's promoted or not, whether it's an organic post or a promoted post, it doesn't matter as long as it's just
Mm-hmm.
native content in feed that they can enjoy. And
And it
this is,
respects the rules of
yes,
the platform,
yes. And TikTok's
unwritten or
rules are
not.
very different than Instagram Reels, even, or YouTube Shorts.
Yeah,
Like,
there's a culture on every platform. And if you don't
totally.
respect the culture, it's going to spit you out and you're never going to be back. And
Yes.
actually, TikTok's so crazy that if you just don't
It's
get
cool.
engagement, they just stop showing people your videos and you're done.
Yep.
So we're talking like, if you're gonna go and do what we're doing, clip a video and throw it on TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
and that's your strategy, and you do not pay attention to building a community, and you do not pay attention to the unwritten rules of the platform, think of how much money you can waste before you'll figure that out.
See, and it's so interesting, just the little gem that I have discovered, earned wisdom, as we say around here, which means that I failed successfully, and that was overproduced content or really produced content does great on YouTube because all of the other creators on YouTube are highly produced. It's that competitive effect that you want
Mm-hmm.
to look like the other people that your audience is listening to. Well, on TikTok, everyone's casual. It's just filmed like, you're on a selfie cam, right? So it's not that highly produced content can't do well on TikTok, but if you're not thinking about native consumption and you're not thinking about just using a phone camera to actually create that content or have your marketing team create that content, it's just not it. And again, like there's this old thinking that I hear again and again in clients that I work with and people we've interacted with, Nick, which is, well, how are we going to know who we're reaching?
How
Or
do we
like, how are
know
we going to get their
what's our ROI?
information? And it's like, well, that's not the point, right?
Mhm.
Like, like especially on a platform like TikTok, people are there to be entertained and educated and have a little fun. So if you're providing that to them, that's enough.
Mm,
And just throw in the expense on the TikTok line item into your broad CAC for profitability and see how you can drive demand and understand how you're driving demand.
and just
And,
ask people when
and
they buy
just
how they heard of
yeah.
you or how
Yep.
they heard about you. You throw it in your discovery meeting. I've already heard people through people that are investing in TikTok right now, like Will Aiken, look at all the stuff that he's doing.
Dude,
People are,
unreal.
and then they're fun, but
Yeah.
people are going to pipeline because of TikTok now because it's getting more mature. But this is why we got to keep going back to value and not vanity. I don't give a shit how many people see it. It's
Hmm.
over a quarter or over a year. How many people are actually going into pipeline? And the
Hmm.
problem is sales, especially sales development. The reason why most people default to it is because it's quick. The reality is marketing is on a different level, and I would say it's 2 to 3 times fast or 2 to 3 times slower, but it also is
Yes.
actually about 4 to 5 times faster for sales cycle. So it's
Yes.
you win some, you lose some. You got to understand the pros and cons of your go to market and treat them differently because people will show up differently from the different sources.
100%. And that's where, for me, creative and content is about demand generation, the marketing strategy, about creating demand out in the marketplace and getting in people's minds before they're in a buying cycle so that when they enter the buying cycle, they think of you first. That's the essential
Hmm.
premise. But you only do that with good creative and good content. And a white paper and a blog is just not going to cut it anymore. And that's not, here's the crucial point, it's not that blogs don't work. It is that there is competition in the marketplace and everyone else is using video. And so people are paying attention to video. So it's not that people won't pay attention to your blog. A small percentage of the market might. It's that you're losing a huge percentage of the market if you're not actually invested in creative and content on video platforms because that's where people are. And if I'm like, let's step out of the B2B world. If I want to sell ice cream and I have my little ice cream vendor thing, I'm not just going to hang out on a random street corner in Denver being like, "Hey, you want my ice cream?"
You
Like,
want to go
sure,
to Alaska?
I'd make 3 sales. You know where I want to be? I want to be at the concert hall. I want to be at the venues. I want to be at the outdoor amphitheaters. Why? Because that's where people are. That's where I can make an impression. And the same goes for creative and content.
Well said. I think that's a good place to go and take us to number 4. What do you think?
Number 4, I would agree.
I think we had alluded to it earlier, but most of the people, most sales and marketers do not know enough about customers. And I think this is why so many people are leaning towards those subject matter experts is because the average person you're reaching out, like you get a somebody that's fresh out of college calling on these VPs and trying to go and provide value. How is that relevant? Those
Yep.
VPs would rather talk to their peers or they'd rather go and watch a video that's published or something else because you can't speak their language. And this all comes from your market research and your level of learning, ongoing learning, and who you're targeting. What I see right now in sales teams that I'm training is their targeting is way too broad. I ask them what personas they're targeting, what type of buyers, what type of decision makers, what are the titles that they have, what industries are they targeting, and I always make my lists about 50. They have lists of 1,000 or more, and then are targeting buyers on that, and they're picking one. We need to know who we need to talk to based on actually looking back at history and how the sales process is run. Because I've noticed different industries have different people that step in. You know, if you're selling sales training, sometimes you're actually talking to the HR manager. They're the ones that are talking to you. Sometimes it's marketing, other times it's finance. But I've noticed that there's trends. Different industries tend to have different people. There's also trends on what the ownership is made up. So, for
Hmm.
SaaS, companies that have engineers as they don't typically look at sales because they don't believe soft skills are useful. And so normally it'll be a
Yeah,
sales manager that'll reach out to me because they're the ones that are seeing why the soft skills or lack thereof is getting in the way of them moving through a sales process. And so we
totally.
need to be more clear on who our customers are. You got to have a very dedicated process to where you start. And if you're getting onboarded and they do not teach you about your customer, it's a good sign you're working for a bad company
Hmm.
because they don't take their customers serious enough. And if they just hand you a miscellaneous list of 20, 30, 50, 100, 250 accounts and there's no rhyme and rhythm, this is what I'm seeing. And this is why salespeople are getting a bad rep because they're getting set up for failure from day one.
Totally. And yeah, so I think prediction number 4 explicitly is that market research is no longer a one and done, because it's not, for me, it's not just the speed or the noise of the market anymore, although those are definitely contributing factors. It's that most companies don't learn enough from one market research project to actually build an effective sales process. So it's better to be agile and test and be willing to test on 3 to 6 month cycles, see what you learn, share that information across sales and marketing, and then actually construct a really effective program over time. By no means does that mean you should shoot yourself in the foot at the beginning and go after the big whales because you just want to test it out. Like sometimes it is better to go off Broadway if you're testing a new go to market strategy. But these 12-month plus market research projects that I've I've been a part of, I'll say that, brand consultancies, marketing consultancies, there's research firms that'll spend a year being like, here's what your customers are. Well, uh, not only is the world changing quicker than on a year to year, there's also a lot of in market intelligence that your sales team can learn and can also have to inform the broader go to market strategy. And so companies that um, access that increased amount of information out in the market and also test in market via their sales and marketing teams, I think are going to do extremely well, instead of either guesstimating in a back room or doing it very infrequently.
I was talking to a fairly well known B2B SaaS company, and they run sequences and pretty aggressive email marketing.
Okay.
And so I was lucky enough to talk to the right person to dive into it. Guess when their latest sequence was developed?
Oh no. 2 years ago? Whoa.
Almost 4.
Wow.
And they are still running sequences that are over 8 years old that have not been updated the same language just because somebody fits that title, and they're still getting some sales from it, so they keep running it.
That's rough.
So imagine, and look at this. If you guys pull open your CRM, look at your sequencer, open up your template doc, look at the messaging, and pay attention to your emails and the conversations you're having. This is a good way to test if your messaging is off. Do they quickly understand what you're talking about? And do they want to talk to you?
Mhm.
Because what I've noticed with these sequences is that people either they're too long-winded or they're just irrelevant. And so people are, if they do come back, they're like, what do you want? What is it you're trying to sell me? Because it's not hitting on we were talking about earlier, Morgan, the hook. You're not
Yeah.
hitting you're not hitting on something that's worth their time, because you gotta go and look at how they talk, and you gotta go and build that value very quickly or else they're gone. But this is
Mhm.
why customer research, and if you're updating these all the time, I've seen companies right now that are getting double digit growth quarter over quarter. And what they're doing is they're actually updating all of their sequences every quarter, every 3 months. And what they do is they actually have a monthly meeting that they talk about it was actually very impressive. They actually talk about new deals. So they're
Hmm.
looking at how they're getting customers and how they're doing their sequences. They also have a second part of it where it's customer success and how they're getting them to find, that first value, or getting through that process quickly, where they're seeing the value of the product, and how many of them are actually growing accounts, and they're looking at the full cycle to go and redirect their targeting at the start. Of all the people I've interviewed, I would say that there's been less than 5, and I've interviewed well over 100 now with the
Hmm.
podcast and for sales. So, something to
Yeah,
consider.
I think that for me, part of the reason that people don't do this is that there is a perception that it is expensive in terms of time and finance to either invest in new market research or to invest in new cadences, new sequences, all these alterations all the time. I can already hear the sales directors or the VPs going like, "What are you doing with all of this time?" kind of thing. But
Mhm.
my question is it more expensive than losing all of these customers that you're not serving?
Or
because you
churning and burning the ones you have?
Exactly, because you're not listening to the market and you're not delivering value for them in the way that they want it to be delivered. Like, I understand there are some operational constraints in companies, but from what I've seen with the clients that I work with, more often than not, it is the fact that, well, we there's excuses, basically, if I can be kind and gentle about why they don't do it. There's just excuses, and that's fine. I understand, but you're losing out on a lot in the market if you're not continually testing and refining and updating.
I will, just to kind of cap this off before we get into AI, your
Mm,
intelligence needs to be market, people, and deals. And you need to have KPIs for all three.
yes.
And honestly, 30 minutes a day is all you need. Or a set time every 2 weeks, or a set time every week, or every month. Just pick something that the company comes together and gathers all that information, repackages it, tries again. It doesn't need to be anything extravagant. I will tell you though, the more this is broken up and done individually, so sales managers and directors that are listening to this, if you're leaving this up to your team, it will cost you so much more than a 1 hour meeting every month, because they're going to be spending way more time testing things that they could have done at scale with the whole entire organization. So
Totally.
you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're not doing this. So, Morgan,
Yes.
AI and
AI.
machine learning.
So, an interesting subset of this topic of market research and learning about your customers is obviously these growth of all these ML, AI, et cetera, platforms that are out there for sales enablement, for copywriting, for email writing, for data analysis. Gosh, they're everywhere. AI is the new sort of software trend, which is cool. Like big old algorithms doing stuff that would take us a long time to do. I think the real power and the way that companies could leverage these tools is not as a one and done, not a let's buy this vendor and then never think about it again, but as an enablement or an augmentation tool inside for their learning. Because a lot of those software programs are basically getting to 70 to 90% of what you could do manually if we're generous. Some of them are not as good as that, but in the generous case they're doing a good chunk. And so there's an there's an opportunity or an opening for companies to use these tools to learn, to see what the heck is going on in the market, to try new messaging that gets generated really quick, or to take neural networks that analyze language on a sales call and then pulling charts for the last 60 sales calls that your sales team did and learning from it, not as a oh great, that's what the tool did, let's do something different here, but like actually synthesizing the information and the results that you get from those sorts of platforms, turning them around and saying, okay, now let's change this, and manually changing it, and then using these tools again to sort of ease the back end analysis optimization side, and then learning again. And so this cadence of market research becomes less onerous when you're able to use tools that do a lot of the work, or a good chunk of the important work for you, and then use good judgment and human decision making skills to fill in the gaps.
I've talked to a lot of companies that have invested heavily into Gong,
Hmm.
and it's a cool product.
It's
Can't
a great, yeah.
one of the most interesting things that I'm finding is that less than 30% of the people are updating their conversations, their marketing, their messaging, anything after getting this information. They're just using it for sales traction in that individual sale.
That's
And the
rough.
whole point of having something that's gathering this information that is very black and white is that the bigger the pool, the better the research. And you can start to go and diversify and segment really tight so you can go and change that messaging. But this is why there's the whole thing about so many people have so much data and it's useless. It's because nobody's using it. And this is where us running our own profit centers need to go and take that accountability and use it, especially if your company's paying for it. That is such a key piece of information that is a game changer for content. It's a game changer for creative, and it actually might add value to those email sequences that everybody, I mean, loves that show up in their inboxes every day.
Oh yeah, totally. But to your point, like it's not just about bringing on a tool and seeing how it goes. Like that's nice, but it's what can you learn?
Yeah, what's the
What
point?
can you change? What can you try out? And maybe when you try out something new, it goes in the wrong direction. That's good to know,
It
right?
happens.
Like, I understand the old Silicon Valley adage, fail faster, which I actually don't like. But if that resonates for you, that's sort of the principle here, right? You just want to try out and experiment stuff and see how it goes. Because then if it doesn't go well, at least it was only 2 or 3 deals, right? Or at least it was only 2 to 3 prospects who, we were just trying out something new with. It's not the end of the world, but you can use these tools to really accelerate.
And if you're not careful, trend number 5 is going
Oh,
to rip that opportunity away from you.
I'm ready.
You want to dive
Trend
into it?
number 5. Yes. So prediction number 5 is uh, privacy is going to be a huge thing in 2022. And it's going to be probably earth shattering to a number of marketing teams and potentially sales teams all through the world.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen sort of the beginnings of this in this past year. Apple iOS 14 had an update that allowed users to, if you've seen this prompt on your newer iPhones, like ask app not to track. So basically, that's Apple putting up a little firewall between, frankly, Facebook's trackers on you and your actual activity. And they also had an update in their mail that blocked a lot of the traditional trackers for open rates. And I'm starting to see some issues just this week. I was poking around with Google Analytics data, um, both based on how Google Analytics measures user sessions, and they have some machine learning on the back end because they're trying to keep a lot of data anonymous, but also uh, a lot of the privacy tools from Apple, especially for mobile users, really makes it wonky. And what I see mostly is we've just become too reliant on these data sources. I remember very early on being very excited when you could, I don't know, construct an email sequence based on whether or not somebody opened this email or clicked that email and send this one, and then if they open it, let's
We have
send
a
another
5%
one.
click through.
Yeah, and that's it's gone. And
Mm-hmm.
if you meet an email marketer who says it's not gone, maybe they're right, but by the end of this year, it's going to be gone. And the reason is the platforms are changing. It's not just like consumer led and not just that the fact that consumers want it, but it's the devices and the platforms are installing new privacy tools that protect people's information. And while Google has delayed their first party cookie or third party cookie changes for maybe another year into 23, that's soon going to be incredibly disruptive to the traditional way that lead generation, frankly, is done in a lot of go to market strategies. And what this leads us to, I believe, is a incredible emphasis on in market intelligence. So information that you can gather based on actually having conversations with customers that is not able to be produced by any of these platforms. That's hard work. Also, as we mentioned earlier, creative and content is going to play a huge role because if you think about it, in many ways, we're sort of reverting to the way marketing used to be done, but just on digital channels. Like you used to take out an ad in Home and Country or whatever, with the thought that the readers of Home and Country would benefit from your product. Okay. And the hope is they see your ad. That is sort of the extreme direction that these privacy tools are going to take us. And that means you have to be really good with your creative and content and your copywriting to get somebody's attention, to watch a video, to whatever, compared to the previous MO. And now the ads are also more expensive, but it used to be, even just a few years ago, you just run 6 different A B tests and see which one works the most. Now, will that go away in 22? No. But the trend is we're going to see a big shift in a lot of digital marketing habits, and investing in creative and content allows you to circumvent a lot of those issues because you can be more confident in what you're actually putting out in the market is beneficial to your customers,
It's
or will
gonna.
get their attention at least.
I don't. And, I'd love to hear your opinion. I don't think it's gonna kill email marketing. I don't think this is gonna kill a lot of tactics. It's just gonna kill a lot of lazy vanity metrics. And so if you're relying on useless metrics, they're all going to disappear. So open rates, so click through. And yeah, I get why they can be good, but if those people aren't showing up in your pipeline, if those people aren't actively involved in your community, and all you're trying to do is end up just kind of push until you get them there, this is what's giving sales and marketing bad names, is because people, instead of doing the hard work, did the lazy work. And if this pisses you off, please send me a DM. I'd love to go and chat with you about it, because it is. Instead of acting like a sniper, people bought a machine gun and just started firing at everything that moves. So instead
Yeah.
of sending one crappy email, they would send 1,000 instead.
Mm-hmm.
And it was easy to do so. It was also cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So
And now it's not. I mean, it's not cheap in a different way. And while you can, I know you can still English. I know you can still track click through rates, especially if you're using like UTM codes, and that's sort of the extreme version. And generally, you can track click throughs pretty easily because it's a different technology. That still doesn't give you that much information. And this has always been my opinion. Like, what? They clicked an email, so what? Okay. Like, are they
mhm.
actually talking to you, or did they just like want to watch the little video that you sent and then they're not interested? So, back to the discipline around good sales and marketing fundamentals are going to get you a lot farther than a technology platform will in this next year. Now,
Mhm.
technology always augments, so it can get you farther, but those fundamentals are going to be the difference point. That's going to be the lever.
Time to jump into 6, and I notice we're
6
coming up on the
indeed.
hour, so this one's going to be a long one. And please, if anybody has questions, throw
Yeah.
them in the comments. Be happy to go in, and if even about past predictions, please throw
Yep.
them in there, and we'd be happy to go over them with you.
All right. Number 6, Nick, your favorite.
Customer success is finally going to play a bigger role. And I don't know why we got away from this. I don't know if it's just the push that so many companies were getting pressure from finance to go and just sell more, or if
Yeah.
it was just the vanity metrics on the sales activity to justify their existence. But so many companies started to double or triple down on outbound or inbound or any sales movement, but that never included keeping their customers or growing accounts. And that wasn't how I started in sales. It was all about, like, we got judged on retention. If your retention dropped too low, you got put on plan or you were fired, because it was a big how they showed up in customers' eyes. They knew that it's hard to win that back. And so they
Yep.
would you were gone. And so now I think we're going to, and I think it was the Reveal podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Revenue Intelligence, I believe it is Gong. Yeah, they were talking about know and grow, which I love, because I hate the land and expand, because people will go and sell crap just to go and get in the door and then hope to God that they can sell more. The problem is with that strategy is, if they don't see value in the first sale, that's something you can't go back from. But I
No.
love this know and grow, because the more they know, the more they'll grow, which actually, if you look at how HubSpot grew, it actually explains it beautifully, because
Yeah.
it wasn't the fact that they did all this inbound marketing. I think that people get too caught up on that bullshit and they don't realize what they actually did really, really well and still do is they invest a lot after that transaction to keep growing accounts and keep them happy. And honestly, like if I go and call our people we have a group of people we can talk to get advice, they're amazing. That is
Hmm.
why they're winning. It's not because of how they're going to market, it's how they're winning after the fact on the know and grow. So if you don't have this and you don't have a customer success role, or you're just not having a very clear, defined movement or strategy of how you're working with accounts post transaction, you're you're going to struggle. And I think
Yeah.
banks even are actually looking at this now of, you're going for funding. Oh, it's great. You got how many new customers and how many new logos? How many stayed?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's because, yeah, it's all about your runway, right? Like if you can keep 40% of your revenue, I don't know, um, on know and grow, or 60% of your revenue on know and grow, that means you only have to supplement the other piece from acquisition. But as we've talked about ad nauseum on this live show, for anyone who wants to go back and listen to the archives, you're more than welcome, but you'll hear this mentioned again and again. Companies habitually overinvest in acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the most mind-boggling thing to me. Not I get like, okay, I understand why, because I have enough understanding of the companies and customers and the power dynamics, but from a business fundamental sense, it makes no sense to me, because
Yeah.
acquisition is only one lever at your disposal, but you're putting 90% of your resources there. Like it's great to have more customers, but if you could take an existing account from and grow it in a year, the total contract value by 30%, 50% or more, just by delivering value upfront and then continuing to deliver value, you don't have to invest as much in acquisition to achieve your growth numbers overall. But again, because there's all sorts of incentives on the revenue or on the acquisition side, and not thinking about revenue as its entirety, it creates a skewed incentives for companies to overinvest in acquisition and measure marketing and sales performance. And then, if they stay around, whatever, which is not a good situation to be in. You don't want to work for or work with a company who says, yeah, whatever about our existing customers. That is, you have, technically speaking, zero acquisition cost for an existing customer. You already acquired them.
And social psychology is on your side.
Yeah.
They said yes to something smaller. You come back with something bigger and better. Well, not only do they trust you, but they know you can deliver on your promise. So is it really that big of an ask to go and do something bigger and better with them? No.
No.
Uh, and honestly, the reality is this is not going to change. Just putting customer success as a title is a vanity metric until sales, and you guys are going to hate me for saying this, but until most salespeople are comped based on retention, and that is a metric that's actually being tracked industry wide, it's not going to change, because we're going to go and do the activities that make us money
Yeah.
or keep our jobs.
Or true. Totally true. Do you want to move on to 7?
So 7 is not going to be a surprise to you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Companies are really struggling right now with the work from home. And now we moved in, we've always been a global market,
Hmm.
but now it has become painfully aware how much competition there is for good talent. Because as long as you have decent internet connection and a laptop, you are now competitive in the market. And if you have the background to go and prove that you can do what you do, doors are open. And so people, you know, being good little sheep and just doing as they're told is gone.
Yeah.
Most bigger companies don't care about their people, and they don't take care of them. They don't set them up for retirement. Like, my grandparents would always talk about the unions and all the pensions and all the great benefits they got from working with a big company versus small. That doesn't exist. That promise is gone. And it's also been
Hmm.
burned in the public eye,
Hmm.
where we've watched a lot of companies that were supposed to take care of people and fulfill these promises just back off. But we're also one thing I think is not talked about enough is we now have more peer-to-peer sharing than we've ever had before. And maybe I'll go and throw it in when I write the article for this with you, Morgan. But
Mm-hmm.
I think number 8 prediction is sales managers are going to finally become more than managers, and they're going to actually get the fire under them to go and coach
Mm-hmm.
and do something bigger, which will tie into everything we said. But look what's going on right now, and look at why there's some. I think right now the retention of sales is something like 42%,
Yeah,
and
and
that
that's
may
in
be on
like
the high side.
12 to 14 months. Like it's not a long time span on that number.
It's hard because we get forced to do the
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable parts of human interaction, and it actually plays on psychology's or most innate human fear of rejection. We all want to be loved in other people's eyes and accepted. The greatest thing
Mm-hmm.
is greatest fear is rejection. That's why public speaking is so scary, or people going on a live show like this and just being open and honest in front of, thousands of people.
Yeah.
But right now, peer to peer conversations on LinkedIn and communities and Slack and all this, people are talking about not only their pay, which they never did before because it was, faux pas.
Taboo.
But
Yeah.
yeah, now not only are they talking about pay, but they're talking about benefits, and they're talking about the environment and the training. And a lot of people are realizing that a lot of sales organizations really don't do anything for ongoing education. And from the marketing side, it might actually be even less.
Mm-hmm.
All their
Yeah.
marketing budget goes to events or it goes to
Oh,
tech. It doesn't go to ongoing education or research or anything. And so it's funny, you look at RevOps and you look at what companies are willing to spend money on, and they'll throw somebody in a weekend class, or they'll throw somebody, on a digital course. They'll go and run an event, they'll go and run a live show. They'll justify dollars on events and activities, but they don't actually have an active plan to reinvest in their people. And this is where this came to, is that a lot of people realized that they were going to take it for granted,
yeah.
and there were better options and better pay just about
Yes.
anywhere else. And so they
And
got stuck in that one spot in that one role,
mm-hmm.
and they weren't allowed to grow. And the
Yep.
comp plans kept sneaking up. And I've noticed this too, that you look at how the market's growing or not, and you look at how your quota is growing, and it's irrespective of the market. And they don't care because they always want 5 or 10% more.
Yeah.
But where? How?
Yeah.
And I think
And
that sales managers are going to, and leadership is going to have their feet to the fire saying, justify this quota. You're robbing me of my ability to go and take care of my family and build a life for myself with this income instability. Not because I'm good or I'm bad. It's because you've set me up for failure. Show me how you justify this, or I'm going somewhere that will.
yes.
Bye.
And my take is very much in that vein. This is a LinkedIn post a number of months ago, I think, which is that this whole idea of the great resignation, whatever you want to call it, it's just competition. It's
Yeah.
just good old law competition. And the reason it feels so intense now, and the reason it is actually quite intense now, is because Minneapolis companies did not used to compete against New York companies, right? Denver companies did not compete against Seattle companies because you lived where you worked, because you
Mm-hmm.
went into an office. So the talent pool that somebody in Seattle would hire for, you either relocate that talent to the city or you hire locally. Well, now for lots and lots of jobs that we interact with, and especially in our industries, Nick, you can do them remotely. So you
Yeah.
can live anywhere and you can work for any company. And so now the company in Denver is competing against the company in Minneapolis that is competing against the company in Seattle or New York. And in my view, because we have never had this level of competition before in the talent pool in the labor market, companies definitely got caught just a total blinded or sideswiped. That's the kind of term I'm going for here around what
Mm-hmm.
it means to actually compete for talent. And the companies that can nail not just good pay, because good pay is the foundation. You have to have good pay, and not just good benefits, which are particularly important in the United States. Those are sort of like foundational stuff. What you had mentioned previously, which is about the culture and the ops setup for any position in the revenue arm of a company. That's sales, marketing, uh, uh, success, arguably these new RevOps positions, whatever they do.
Hmm.
How teams work together, how the culture supports growth. Those are the important questions to be asking, because as the old rule is, people don't quit a company, they quit their boss,
Yep.
right?
Did
So
I
if
tell you what the
you're
most common question that people ask when they quit of my friends that I've
oh
talked
no,
to? Did I tell you
no,
this?
no, I want to hear.
So I have quite a few friends that have left recently, quite a few, in sales and marketing. And I asked them what happened, or and originally it was just kind of like, you're trying to console them and be a good friend. And then it started to pique my curiosity. But one question kept coming up. And the one that they asked themselves is, how are you making me better?
Mm,
And I was like, that's an interesting one. And one of my friends, I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I'm making you better by making you money, and you're not respecting me by paying me more or giving me an environment. You're just pushing me to always do more.
yes.
So how are you making me better, or how are you helping me get there?
Hmm.
I'm
That's
like,
good.
that is a great question to summarize that whole thing up.
And that's why go to market is not separate from your HR or talent, right? The way part of go to market are the people that you have on your team and their
Mm-hmm.
skills and the culture and the way that you support them and the way that they're able to grow and learn in a role. And like, sadly, lots of companies aren't even getting the foundation right. They're not even paying people enough. And so that's a whole discussion to itself. Or their benefits are totally wacky. That's another conversation. But even if you have good pay and good benefits, if you're not able to retain talent, not just a testament to the specific job that they're working, like Nick brought up. How am I being supported in this role? It's the larger company culture too. I have known many a people who will quit companies and have in this last year because they didn't feel, while their manager was good, they felt like they didn't have anywhere to go in the company. So they were stuck in their role, or the rest of the company, their little team was like a tight, safe bubble, but the rest of the company was a total mess and was just fires all the time. And and all of this is sticky and difficult issues and persist in every company everywhere. But there are companies that nail it, and we can learn from their examples, because we can go around and, I mean, there's plenty of LinkedIn stories and posts about retaining talent and seeing what good companies do from a cultural perspective that help people learn and help people grow. So in this next year, I think that will only become more true
But
as companies compete.
I want to throw one thing in at the end that, as you were talking,
Yes.
it kind of just hit me as a realization. All the companies that I've talked to recently and all the companies I've worked for in the past spent more time hounding us, sales, on our benefits and our comp plan and the cost to them than
Yes.
they did on cost to customers. How much it costs for
Yes.
them to get a customer or keep a customer. How mind blowing is that?
That's pretty twisted, Nick. If you think about it, that's really twisted, man. Well, those are our 7 predictions. Just to summarize really quick, I'll just do the quick gauntlet for us since
Let's
we're
do
over
it.
time. Number one being ABM is going to be all the hype, and very few companies are going to be able to execute well because they don't have enough budget, marketing staff, or tech stack to support it. Number two is that people are going to need to reassess their routes to market and see if they're profitable and centered on customers' needs, because buyers' preferences have changed and the competitive landscape has changed too. Number three being social media is going to dominate, particularly in video content and platforms that prioritize video content. So getting really good at video is going to support your go to market in 22. Number
Mm-hmm.
four is that market research needs to be iterative or agile. It does not need to be a one and done, and it should not be. And the more that you learn and share that knowledge, the better off you're going to be. And AI can help with that. Number five, being privacy is going to continue to change the landscape of digital marketing this next year. Certainly from the basics on the email marketing and digital advertising targeting, but even bigger trends as consumers become more privacy aware. And then number six is customer success will finally get its role in the spotlight. Yay! And it's good. It's important. It needs to be invested in because it drives long-term sustainability of revenue. And number seven is that companies need to up their game when it comes to retaining talent. Otherwise, they're going to suffer in the competition that this next year poses for them. So those were our 7 predictions for B2B Go-to-Market in 22. Nick, do you have any closing thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate you every week, and we thank you for downloading the podcast and being on there as well. If you have any questions, please, throw them below, throw them in DMs, send us an email, and I would love to hear which was your favorite. What was your biggest takeaway from today? Throw it in the comments or reach out to us.
Absolutely. And a very happy new year to everyone. I hope you have a lovely weekend celebrating and Monday doesn't come too soon. Or Tuesday or whenever you come back to work.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Happy New Year.